The Prince of Egypt is one of my favorite animated movies of all time. Well, that's not really right. It's one of my favorite movies of all time, period. And that might seem a bit strange since I'm a rather agnostic person and also a grown adult, but I've started to like this film even more as I've gotten older. This movie has a depth and heaviness to it that is pretty surprising, even by the standards of the 90s when cartoons were way darker than they are today. And it hits you right out of the gate. This is one of the most gripping opening sequences of any film that I've seen. The art is breathtaking, and it's such a visceral scene that shows the extent of the suffering of the Hebrew people. The music is beautiful too. Hans Zimmer scored this film, and the lyrics are gut-wrenching. This is an insane opening scene for a family film, and it really sets up the rest of the movie and prepares you for what's to come. There's an intense level of emotional depth throughout the film, because not only is the biblical story compelling to begin with, but the writers added a lot of other really clever plot elements that add further depth. I mean, if you even think about the movie title, it's actually pretty subversive. It's not based on our typical view of Moses, the Hebrew deliverer who freed his people. This film is about his identity as the Prince of Egypt, and about how Moses navigates the fractured parts of his very personhood and finds his calling. It's a complete subversion of the way that we usually think of Moses. And viewing the movie through that lens reveals how emotionally rich this film is. Like this shot, where Moses is visibly distraught over the destruction of Egypt. When I watched this as a kid, I didn't really know how attached people get to the places where they were raised. But understanding that concept as an adult makes the second half of the movie incredibly heavy. Moses returns to the place he called home and brings it to ruin. The characters' facial expressions are so well done in this film, and you really see how painful this is for Moses. And of course, this leads to the most obvious way that the writers introduce nuance and depth, and that's through the character of Ramses. In this film, Moses' antagonist ends up being his own brother, and therefore the ending feels as bittersweet as it does triumphant. Moses is continually grieving for his brother throughout, such as this scene after the final plague, and it's a really hard scene to watch. And Moses' final words in the film are when he says goodbye to Ramses beneath his breath. The movie goes on for another minute and 40 seconds after this, but Moses doesn't say another word, despite the rather triumphant ending. And the film uses a really clever visual device to symbolize their connection. It's this ring that Ramses gives to Moses. This visual metaphor is reinforced by the fact that this ring is turquoise, which is the color that Ramses wears throughout the movie, just as Moses wears red. And even though Moses takes off his royal attire in the desert, he holds on to the ring. And this ring is prominent in the shots with the burning bush and when he picks up his staff, a subtle reminder of who and what he will need to confront in order to bring freedom to his people. When Moses returns to Egypt, Ramses treats him like a younger brother at first, wanting to continue on with their relationship as before. But the tone completely changes when Moses returns the ring to him. You can see the disappointment and pain on his face, which turns to anger and determination. And it's in this moment that his overall demeanor completely shifts, and he becomes this menacing, imposing figure for most of the rest of the film. And the ring shows up again in this scene, which is incredibly layered. There's Ramses' son standing in front of this mural beneath the Hebrew children, then Ramses assuming the same pose as his father while wearing the ring he gave to Moses, and delivering the line that there will be a great cry in all of Egypt, thinking he is speaking of the Israelites but really bringing this decree upon himself and his own people through his stubbornness. There's so many layers of foreshadowing and callbacks happening at the same time. It's genuinely amazing for a family film. And Ramses is a very sympathetic character as well. The first half of the movie really establishes that he just wants to make his father proud and continue the legacy of his lineage. His father's implication that Ramses might be the weak link in the chain of pharaohs haunts him throughout the film, and it serves as his primary motivation for not wanting to let the Israelites go free. And on top of this, Moses and Ramses had the exact same attitude towards the suffering of the Israelites at first. Neither of them cared or even really noticed before Moses realized he was one of them. So Moses wasn't this righteous defender of justice, with Ramses being a callous dictator. Their attitudes were exactly the same until Moses realized that he himself was a Hebrew. And while this obviously doesn't excuse the actions of Ramses, the fact that him and Moses are so similar at first introduces some complexity that is really fascinating. And there's this question that Aaron asks Moses in passing, out of anger. He says, "When did you start caring about slaves? Was it when you realized that you were one of us?" And that rhetorical question is piercing because it reflects the truth, and it just sort of hangs there without a satisfying answer or conclusion. And these plot elements deviate quite a bit from the biblical story, but they introduce so many emotional layers in a way that is brilliant. They build on the source material in such a masterful way. And I think this is one reason why there are so many comments about this movie that say, "I'm not religious, but I love this film." Now, I fully agree with that sentiment, and I basically said that at the start of the video too. But ironically, I think the religious aspect of the film allows them to get away with a very candid and direct portrayal of darker, more adult themes while still being marketed as a family-friendly film and therefore receiving the budget and reach of a family film. And here's what I mean. The story of Moses is so common and well known that it softens a lot of the more intense parts of the movie. When you're already familiar with the story of Moses, along with the rather disturbing parts of it, it takes most of the initial shock away from seeing those things depicted. And it allows the movie to reference topics that you couldn't reference so directly otherwise. Like, some of the things that are depicted are pretty crazy for a family movie. And yes, animated films used to be incredibly dark at times, but they always had something to sort of lighten things up for the kids. This was usually in the form of like anthropomorphic talking animals or objects. Like, The Lion King has a brutal plot, but all the characters are animals, so it really softens things up as opposed to if these were humans like going after their own family members. It's a similar principle with this horrific movie. If you've seen this, you know exactly what scene I'm thinking of. Mulan is also a pretty dark movie, but it has Eddie Murphy voicing this comedic talking dragon, and the cricket is really fun and cute too. Plus, there's a ton of slapstick with these three guys to lighten things up. But with The Prince of Egypt, there aren't any anthropomorphic talking animals or any childish gimmicks like that. And while there's some slapstick early on, that disappears almost entirely in the second half of the film. The thing that softens it and makes it a family-friendly film is simply the fact that it's a well-known Bible story, and a ton of people were very familiar with it already. The film doesn't have to throw in these other gimmicks. And maybe I'm projecting a bit because I was a very wimpy kid. Like, I thought Beauty and the Beast and that 3D dinosaur movie were terrifying. And yet I had no problem with this film because I was already familiar with the Bible story since my family is Christian. And the reason why this is all important is that it would never have gotten such a large budget if it wasn't a family film. From my knowledge, The Simpsons movie was the first PG-13 animated film to receive a budget in the ballpark of The Prince of Egypt. And that was because it was based on one of the most popular TV series ever. So with The Prince of Egypt, you kind of got the best of both worlds. You had the more mature tone of a PG-13 movie without the childish gimmicks, but it also had the budget of a family blockbuster. And that budget allowed them to create something that was visually stunning and had a star-studded lineup from top to bottom. I mean, look at this. One of the most stacked casts that I've ever seen. And of course, you had Hans Zimmer on the soundtrack along with Mariah Carey, Whitney Houston, Boyz II Men, and other acclaimed musical artists. And I'll be remiss if I don't emphasize again how visually beautiful this film is. I think that's honestly one of the best parts of the movie for me, and it's reason enough to watch this film. I feel like trying to analyze the visuals would almost be a disservice because they really just need to be experienced. So, is this the best animated film of all time? Well, it's certainly my favorite traditionally animated Hollywood film, and it isn't particularly close. Now, I know that's pretty specific, but I think when you start introducing foreign films or 3D animated films into the discussion, it kind of gets a little muddy and subjective, and a lot of it feels like comparing apples and oranges at that point. But to me, The Prince of Egypt is in a league of its own compared to its counterparts, and I think it deserves more attention. But anyway, please feel free to leave a comment that says I'm not religious, but I love this movie, and I'll see you in the next video.